Hello all, this is Chartered Accountant Omkar Gadgir. This video we have specifically made to cover a few of the amendments which have been made effective from 1st of October 2022 but which are specifically relating to the GST compliance on a monthly basis. Now friends, this amendment or these amendments probably what we are trying to cover were actually through the budget 2022, the effective date of which has been considered to be 1st of October 2022. This came in by notification issued on 28th of September 2022. Now, what are the specific amendments which need to be really given a due care of, because these are going to make certain nuances in your monthly compliance habits that we already have. By now, we have already come a long way filing GSTR 1, GSTR 3B, then GSTR 2A, 2B compliances. Even from 1st of January 2022, we started following the GSTR 2B limitations or the credit as per GSTR 2B. But now a step further, what exactly is going to happen from the month of from the month of October 2022 when we are going to do the compliances. And of course, since it has come in with effect from 1st of October 2022, we are presuming one part that this is applicable for the compliances that you are supposed to do for the September 2022, so that the returns which will be filed on 20th of October 2022, these compliances should be kept in mind. Now friends, as per the input tax credit which comes in GSTR 2B, GSTR 2B which gives you the data of all the outward supplies filed by your suppliers or by the supplier of your clients, and that is reflecting in GSTR 2B. In respect of that data, now there will be specifically the bifurcation in two parts. Currently also it is visible on the GSTR 2B portal, but it is going to be now available in two parts, the bifurcation of the GSTR 2B data. One is that the input tax credit which is available, and second is the input tax credit which is not available, or which is also called as restricted input tax credit. Now friends, when we say input tax credit available, again there are going to be two possibilities. That is, either the input tax credit is eligible to you, that is as per normal conditions of section 16, that is a eligible input tax credit for your business, so you will be able to claim the input tax credit. Or it may be a possibility that it is appearing in your GSTR 2B under the category as ITC available, but because of the reasons of the blocked credit under section 17 subsection 5, it can be treated as ineligible. So the portal is not going to give you a bifurcation of eligible and ineligible credits. Please remember that we have to do by our own only, as we have been doing till now. So under the input tax credit as per GSTR 2B, there will be two different verticals. One is ITC available, that means something that you are allowed to claim, and under that you have to decide whether it is eligible or ineligible. That is what you have to decide. This will not be given on the portal. What the portal is now newly going to give you is that the ITC which is not available means something which appears in your GSTR 2B but which is not available, or it is restricted for you for claiming for the purpose of input tax credit. Now that is what is something that really needs to be given importance at. Now what is that input tax credit which is restricted or not available? Let us try to understand that. Now, as per the specific clause which was inserted in the Finance Bill 2022, there were specific scenarios which were given when the law can, or the lawmakers now can decide as to when a input tax credit of my supplier, of input tax credit of me, beg your pardon, of me as a taxpayer will be considered as in restricted or not available to the taxpayer. Now, this completely depends on the supplier's compliance level, if the recipient is going to be in a position to claim the credit or not. So let us see the various scenarios where the input tax credit might be put under the restricted category. Now the first one is given as, if it is received, means if the supplier category is a registered person within such period of taking registration as may be prescribed. Means if my supplier, if I am a taxpayer, let's assume that, and if my supplier is somebody who has newly taken the registration, then till that time there is a specific time which will be given up to which all the purchases which are made from him, for the time being, they will be considered as restricted input tax credit. Now does it mean that every newly registered person is going to give you ineligible credits or restricted credits for that matter? The answer is no. Only for the time being, there will be a specific time, probably it is going to be 3 months from the time when he gets registered, your input tax credit will be considered as Restricted means if I am a taxpayer, I am buying goods or services from such a person who is newly registered. For the initial period from him taking the registration, the purchases made from such a supplier will be treated as under the restricted input tax credit. Now, what is the impact of that? Does it mean the credit is lost in permanency? The answer is no. It will have to be deferred, means that input tax credit will have to defer for a specific timeline till the time that goes out of the restricted category. You have to defer that. When that invoice will appear in the available category, you might as well can claim that credit, but it is only a deferral. Now friends, the only challenge over here is that when the input tax credit is appearing under the restricted category, and the time limit for claiming the credit which is available under section 16 subsection 4, if there is a possibility that currently my newly registered vendor was put under the restricted category, so I could not claim the input tax credit. If till the time limit under 16.4, that is for the financial year, the 30th November of the financial, that is the subsequent year, till that day also, if he is not put back into the ITC available category, or if he is not put out of the restricted category, I have a fear of losing the input tax credit. And this applies to all the categories. Now let us see the second one, when my credit gets restricted. If the supplier is a registered person who has defaulted in payment of tax, and where his default has continued for such a period as may prescribe, which is again going to be 3 months period, 3 continuous periods. So if my vendor is a tax defaulter for a perpetual period, and if I'm buying goods or services from such a vendor, then his ITC amount will appear under my GSTR to be in the category restricted credit. Means again, till the time he is not flagged appropriate supplier, I will have to defer his input tax credit availment. Again, the risk and the exposure to my business is that my input tax credit vulnerability will remain open if my 16.4 time limit for availing credit goes. If the registered person, means if the supplier is a registered person, the output tax which is payable by whom in accordance with the statements of outward supplies is less than what I beg your pardon, he is exceeding what he is actually paid. Means if he has paid through his GSTR 3B, let's suppose a tax of rupees 1 lakh. But if his furnished statements reflect that he should have been paying tax on rupees 1,20,000 and not a tax on rupees 1 lakh, that means he has short paid the tax. In such a case also, if such a vendor has been flagged, his credit will be credit will be considered as restricted, and in my GSTR 2B it will be under the restricted category, and I'll have to defer the input tax credit availment of such supplier. The next possibility is that who has for a particular period availed input tax credit which is in excess of the amount which is appearing in his GSTR to be. Means, I'll give you a simple example. I am a taxpayer. I have a vendor, Mr. A. Now, if Mr. A is a defaulter, by what way? That Mr. A has been availing input tax credit which is higher than the input tax credit what he is eligible to avail for a particular tax period. And if that default has continued, then for any period, then his supplies or his outward supplies to me will be considered as restricted for the purpose of input tax credit, and I'll have to again defer the availment of input tax credit. So for me, A's availment of input tax credit excessively is also a challenge. Next is, if the registered person who has defaulted in discharging his tax liability according to the provisions of 4912, and again the conditions and restrictions, subject to a condition and restriction as may prescribe, means wherever there is a issue about the tax payment of my vendor, I have a problem that his credit will be appearing in as restricted credit, and any other reason what is considered or prescribed as per the rules and regulations. Now, what are the common implications of all these possibilities under restricted credit is my input tax credit availment gets deferred. I have all the purchases, I have all the documents, everything is there as per section 16, but because of this specific provision which is now going to be effective, my input tax credit becomes not available or restricted till the time he is not flagged to be a regular taxpayer. So his supplies, unless they appear under the ITC available category, I will not be in a position to avail the input tax credit. So the only challenge is that if under 16.4 my time limit for availment of input tax credit has elapsed, but my vendor is not brought from the restricted category to the regular category, I have a I have a specific issue of losing out on that input tax credit. So this is something what is going to really call upon for a very stringent one-on-one, one-on-one relation correlation with your vendors, vendor reconciliation, vendor communication, vendor policies. Because unless this is cleared, you will not be able to claim the input tax credit, and all these vendors will have to, all the vendors of the business for a taxpayer will have to be informed, well informed, that the repercussions are losing out of input tax credit if it is not brought in the regular channel within timeline. And the next, which is next amendment again, which is going to be something very much making an impact. Now let's say that I have availed input tax credit on some purchases on the basis of the self-assessment, and subsequently it appears so that a vendor has not made a tax payment. Now let's say that in the month of October 2022, I make some purchases. In the month of November, I can see that purchase in the GSTR 2B, it is not in the restricted category. I have availed the input tax credit. Now, subsequently, it is found that this person has not, the supplier has defaulted in payment of tax. Fine. For the subsequent period, he'll be put under the restricted category. Let's say in the November 22, he's put under the restricted category. But what about the credit which I already availed for the month of October 22? The repercussions are that I have to reverse the input tax credit along with interest. However, once the supplier who has defaulted in the tax payment has made the payment of tax to the government, I will be able to re-avail that input tax credit whenever he makes a payment and his payment of tax has been made to the government. But the only thing is that the interest which I paid when I reverse the input tax credit becomes like a sunk cost for my business at the at the only default of my supplier. So as a taxpayer, now it is really relevant for us to have these things very much envisaged in your purchase orders, that if there is a default on behalf of the supplier in compliance on basis of tax payments, which leads to reversal of input tax rate along with interest, then there are two exposures. One is, till the time he does not pay the tax, I cannot re-avail the credit. Second is, the interest which I have paid, even if I get to re-avail the credit on once he makes the payment of tax, the interest which I have paid has become a sunk cost for my business, and therefore it is very much relevant for us to have it communicated that this needs to be recovered from the vendor as a part of the business policy. Of course, subject to the whatever business relations you and your vendors share. But as a sound business principle, this can really not be accepted that you are paying interest because of the default of the supplier. These were the few specific amendments which are going to make an impact, and therefore we have made this video to discuss these amendments. Of course, in the times to come, there is the GSTR 3B, if it is going to reflect all this data every month, there is going to be these red flag transactions for which you will not be able to claim the input tax credit, especially if the credit is appearing in the restricted input tax credit, or if it is coming under this category where you have already availed the credit and subsequently are made to reverse that. So friends, this was the discussion for the while, which is going to be immediately made, which has been probably made effective in fact from 1st of October 2022, and this is what we had specifically to discuss. We please feel free to reach out to us for any queries. Thank you so much. Have a good day ahead. Bye bye. Take care. Jai Hind.